Hey, and welcome back to another episode of Joe Yo. And you know what? Let's just jump into it. So, there are 365 days in a calendar, unless you count your leap year, 366. It's got to be really, really weird for a person to have been born on February 29th. I know someone that was born February 29th, and she celebrates her birthday once every 4 years, although, I mean, honestly. But, it's amazing what difference a single day can make. Some days just are like chock full of just like events that you think, oh my gosh, this is like a big deal. Today is a big deal. I mean, there are several of those, Of course, 9/11 comes up in your mind. That's a big deal. July 4th, 1776. But you know what you need to do? We need to put October 12th. Not particular year, because you'll see it in why in a second, but October 12th should be in that list of days that we just put in our minds, not just as, I guess, Americans, but just world citizens and even Charleston County residents, and you'll see why in a second. Just to give you some example, right? So, on October 12th, 1692, the Salem witch trials ended. That's a big deal. On July 12th, 1793, the building started on the oldest state university building in the United States. The Old East building at UNC is the very first state-funded university building. In 1810, October 12th, the very first Oktoberfest was held in Munich, Germany. 1822, the only empire that was ever in the Western Hemisphere was established. It was in Brazil. So, yeah, we actually had an emperor of Brazil. His name was Emperor Dom Pedro. How about this one? This probably seems a little bit bigger for you. How about October 12th, 1492? Now, if you are pretty sharp and you know your American or world history, you'll know that's the date of the very first landfall for Christopher Columbus in the New World. He touched down in the Bahamas on October 12, 1492. Now, you add that along with the 1692 Salem witch trials ending. With 200 years later, the Salem witch trials ended. I don't think there's a connection, but I don't know. 1793, another 101 years later, but these events are pretty big. So get this. 1492, of course, was the first landfall for Columbus in the Bahamas. But in 1892, 400 years later, was the first time that the Pledge of Allegiance was ever said in a public school building. And it was only recently written. It really only has recently been written and adopted as official. That only happened in 1942 that we actually had an actual Pledge of Allegiance. It's only been in the last 80 years. It was during World War II. It makes perfect sense. Now, the Pledge of Allegiance has changed a lot over the years. Words have changed, believe it or not. Those people that think that the Pledge of Allegiance is absolutely static and unchanging, yeah, that's not so. Those that think the Pledge of Allegiance was somehow adopted by the Continental Congress in the 1700s, yeah, that's not true either. It wasn't even adopted during the American Civil War. This is a recent thing. It's changed a lot over the years. Again, words changed. And even when you do the Pledge of Allegiance in schoolhouses and where you put your hand over your heart and you say your Pledge of Allegiance, well, even that has not been the same. That only has changed recently as well. The current form of the Pledge of Allegiance, in its entire words, was only really adopted in the way we recognize it with a salute and all in 1954. Now, if you want to get some kind of idea, I've talked about where you put your hand. Where else would you put your hand, right? Well, how about this? The very first Pledge of Allegiance that was said, and for the first, 40 years of the Pledge of Allegiance, you would say, I pledge allegiance. And at that point, you put your hand over your heart, but sort of in a fist. I pledge allegiance. You do it with me. Do it with me. You'll understand in a second. I pledge allegiance. Put your hand over your heart in a fist to the flag. And when you say the flag, now you raise your arm up stiffly. Raise your arm up at a 45-degree angle. Keep your palm completely flat. And pretend you're pointing it at a flag. Now do it quickly. I pledge allegiance. Hit the heart. To the flag and raise out. And if you do that the way it's supposed to be done, the way it was done for 50 years, you just also did a Nazi salute. So there. The first pledge, of course, you had to change that in 1942 because, well, obvious. The first pledge to speak of, the very first time we had a pledge of allegiance to actually speak of, didn't even exist. But the first one we had was written by a guy who was a self-described Christian socialist. He called himself a socialist. He was from New York. He was a Union Civil War veteran. His name was George T. Bouch. And he was a strong believer, strong advocate in educating the children of immigrants, especially educating the children of immigrants, because he said we were all immigrants once. It was first published as something resembling the modern pledge in the magazine The Youth's Companion to celebrate the 400th anniversary of the Columbus landing. Again, 400 years before that. The first version was amended by a guy named, they had to change it around a little bit. It was amended by a minister named Francis Bellamy, who is also a self-avowed socialist. He said it himself. And the very first, the way he said it, in his first version, it said, I pledge allegiance to my flag and the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible. It was only 30 years since the Civil War after all, with liberty and justice for all. Now, that was how he wrote the final draft. It was designed to be recited in about 15 seconds, and he originally had in there, before he actually published it, it said the words equality and fraternity before the word liberty, and it's supposed to say, his first draft, what he really wanted was with equality, fraternity, liberty, and justice for all, thinking specifically about the rights, and he said it, about the rights of immigrants, women's suffrage, and the equal rights of African Americans. But Bellamy knew that for some people, some school boards, those were kind of, touchy subjects. For Bellamy also felt that the word fraternity, meaning brotherhood for African Americans, was too remote a realization. It just is not going to happen in our current America, he said. It would only anger some groups. So for the good of the pledge as a whole, he dropped those two, hoping that it would just be implied that we meant to be equal citizens, backing up each other in a brotherhood, regardless of skin color. Now, it also, this pledge, it started kind of small, but when it hit the magazine, man, it went ridiculous because, think about that for a second. If you're going to pledge allegiance to the flag, wouldn't it help to have a flag in your schoolhouse? So right alongside, inside the magazine, The Youth's Companion, were ads designed to send their focus on schools that did not actually have flags. There was a flag maker that put ads all in that Youth's Companion to say, hey, look, schools, you can't really have a pledge of allegiance to the flag without a flag, so here, we'll sell you some flags at just above cost. By October 1892, not every schoolhouse had a flag early on in 1892, but by October 1892, 25,000 American schools had bought one, where more than they had had a year prior. What's more American than making profits from patriotism? You know what I'm saying? Well, the work of Bellamy paid off eventually. School superintendents bought into his pledge and began to use their own local political clout to say, hey, this is a fantastic idea, and lobbied their congressmen to take the movement nationwide, eventually reaching the ears of one President Benjamin Harrison, a one-term Republican from Ohio and the grandson of a one-month former president from Ohio. But on October 12, 1892, the very first Columbus Day was proclaimed by Benjamin Harrison with a new pledge and new flags and 25,000 new schools. The salute was similar, as I said before, to the Nazi salute until December 22nd, 1942, 15 days after the attack on Pearl Harbor and the declaration of war on Germany. It makes sense that you changed it. But back to October 12th. Did you know that October is the third most active month for Atlantic hurricanes? It's true. I mean, of all the facts you would have in your head, that's probably not one of them, but it could be. For example, Hurricane Hazel made its first landfall on October 12, 1954. Everyone around here knows Hurricane Hazel, but it took landfall in Haiti on that date, eventually hitting North Carolina on the 15th as a Category 4. Something you may not know also, that we had something called the Great Hurricane of 1780 that hit same day. We had Hurricane Michael in 2018, Hurricane Matthew in October in 2016, Hurricane Sandy in 2012, October, Wilma in 2005, October, Mitch in 98, and Opal in 95. October is a pretty active month. The same applies to typhoons. Now, if you don't know really you might know what a typhoon, but what a typhoon really is, they're like hurricanes, but they're in the Pacific and also in the Indian Ocean. They turn the opposite direction of hurricanes and are typically bigger and stronger. They're named also like hurricanes. And it is in one of those typhoons and where American patriotism and Johnston County history come together. In 1974, the Vietnam conflict, or at least American participation in it, was winding down. And earlier that year, President Nixon announced the withdrawal of 40,000 more American troops. But many American soldiers remained until complete withdrawal happened in 1975, a year later. Now, one of the functions in 1974 of the United States Air Force was to monitor and gather information on weather events. The USAF used C-130s at the time, typically used for cargo, to fly around and into hurricanes to measure intensity, velocity, wind speed, to determine the diameter, circumference of the eye wall, et cetera, et cetera. That's what they did. The USAF also did this with typhoons, even in the South China Sea near Vietnam, China, and Taiwan during the ending of the Vietnam conflict. So it was. When on October 12, 1974, a U.S. Air Force C-130 took off from Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines to observe and measure the 1974 version of Typhoon Bess. And it had 6 crewmen aboard. Bess was an odd storm. It had 2 centers at first, instead of the usual 1. We think of one eye. This sort of had 2. Eventually, one of them took the other one over. It's not as if Bess was a particularly strong storm. It just brought a ridiculous amount of rain, like some of the more recent hurricanes that we have seen. It was a Category 1, really, but it was a drenching one. It caused floods, mudslides. People died, of course. It caused nearly $50 million in damage in 2020, when you adjust for inflation. The plane took off to measure the outside of the storm in between Taiwan and Hong Kong, which was an area which had been the center of geopolitical storms over the past 3/4 of a century. And according to the reports, the plane was able to get inside, just on the inside of the hurricane, and its radio fell silent. One of the 6 occupants was Tech Sergeant Kenneth Soar. A member of the Sanders family of Forks, North Carolina, Sergeant Soar had experience with the region, having already served honorably in both the Korea and Vietnam conflicts. When Sergeant Soar's C-130 did not report back, the USAF sent out a search party trying to find it. never did, and declared it likely lost, and all 6 crew members lost on October 13. The event happened the day before. The loss of this aircraft, where it was lost, and when it was lost, has led to speculation in some circles ever since and over the years, which I'm not about to promote here. I don't really do conspiracies and stuff like that, but I will say the loss of this particular aircraft and these men is notable. And it's notable in that Tech Sergeant Soar's C-130 weather recon plane is the only time before or since in the history of the program that a weather reconnaissance plane has been lost in its job. The date of October 12th, then, seems to not really spare anybody. It's a date of significance to global history, American history, and the case of Tech Sergeant Ken Soar, local history as well. And that'll do it. I want to give special thanks to a gentleman from Four Oaks, or from Western Johnston County. His name is Caleb Ginn, who provided a lot of research for this story. And again, any information you can give me, I deeply appreciate it. And until next time, y'all be good.